She was in a pretty abusive relationship.
No one has ever seen my wife in sweats out in public. Like nobody. Sleep with as many women as you can. Make sure you're making as much money as you can. Like,
No, I mean it's the most unfulfilling thing ever
mhm.
because there's always another dollar to be made. There's always another girl.
How has your life changed being a dad, though?
I've had to become a lot more efficient with my time.
Mhm.
Before, I could spend an hour and a half, 2 hours at the gym, kind of
Mhm.
BSing and stuff like that. Also here, right at work, it was okay for me to maybe stay until 5:30, 6 o'clock, come a little bit earlier, and I could space out my day a lot more. But now it's like, dude, I got to knock out my workout in an hour, if not shorter, and got to make sure I try to be as present as possible when I'm at home. So that means I got to be efficient with my work. I don't bring it home as much as I used to. Like
Mhm.
obviously, running this all being a COO and running all this stuff, it still requires some element of me like being responsive. Like Ryan and I will chat at night and stuff like that. But I'm a lot less involved in the work
Mhm.
after hours, if that makes sense, right? Like
Yeah.
I still take care of my stuff, but yeah, I think the biggest change has just been the efficiency piece. And because like just and obviously like I don't want to miss out on the things that like even just between she's almost 3 months now, and
Mhm.
just like from and you're dead, but like from being a
Yeah.
newborn, even in those 3 months, she's changed so much, and I'm like, dude, like I want to be there for as much as possible.
Mhm.
Um, and that also comes back to like having good employees and stuff like that. I'm blessed that I was able to take a month off just to like be present for my wife while she was, recovering and all that stuff. Yeah, I think those are the biggest changes. Is just the efficiency piece for sure.
And then is she going back to work or is she staying
So
home?
she's staying home. So she's a hairstylist, and she actually she owns a salon. And she did really really well in her job, and that was one of the things that I was really attracted to her, or that I found attractive about her in the beginning was she has a decent social media following. Predominantly, it was just for hair. So she built this brand. She has a ton of clients and stuff. So for her, it was a big adjustment period piece. Like as she's got closer into pregnancy, where it's like, yeah, I'm going to take less clients. Um, and she initially had the plan on going back. I was always like, dude, I don't know if I want, like, I don't know if you want to, but hey, like we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Um, and right now, she's working 1 day a week, but she's already been like, dude, like I'd so much rather be at home. I'd so much rather be with my baby. And when I'm out at work, I'm literally thinking about um, our baby. And also, we're really blessed that we have like a support system. Like her mom, we moved in across the street from her mom, so she's able to come help out and stuff. But to answer your question, she has about a month left of working that 1 day a week, and then after that, she's done because she just already had clients booked in, and she
Uh-huh.
doesn't want to like cancel on those people.
Mhm.
But she's pretty much closing out her books after that.
Dude, that's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
great, yeah, and I love it. And she's just um, she's adjusted to being a mom so well, and
Mhm.
and obviously she loves it. Like we were like maybe we're gonna be one and done, but we're already talking about having others. So
Yeah, that's cool, man.
it's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I have two and it's so fun and
Yeah.
they have each other and because we've always homeschooled,
Mhm.
and they have a pretty decent age gap. It's like a little under 4 years, but they're like two peas in a pod. They're, Starsky and Hutch.
And
Yeah.
how's the homeschool stuff going? Because we're obviously now we're exploring it, and we had some time, obviously, but it's definitely been more of a conversation lately.
So I would tell, so here's my thing. You're a man of faith, right?
Yep.
Okay. You have it on your social media. You know that you were baptized. It's on your social media. So
Hmm.
just kind of clarifying if anything changed since then.
No, absolutely.
Didn't know if you went through and deleted a bunch of photos. The thing that I like to tell men is if you truly want to cultivate the culture of your children, what are you doing outsourcing the parenting because it is parenting, it is influential to your children from the most influential time in their life. From a psychological standpoint, even Jordan Peterson has pointed out, like, we know the outcome of children from 2 to 5 based on how they are socialized in that time. And yet
Mm-hmm.
we want to say, hey, stranger, you're probably going to do a better job with my children than I am. And then we
Yeah.
wonder why, like, kids go through a public school system and then they're not of like faith, but like the parents are like, but we go to church on Sunday. So,
Yeah.
and
And it
then
cuts everything. Like you're not able to connect. Or well, you open the door up to so many different viewpoints, so many different types of people, and not that that's wrong, but I think there's a time and place for it too. Like,
there is. And so, like, us as men, it's like, are we so confident in our faith in what we're doing that we don't mind the day that they're like, hey, my friend Billy is Mormon and wants to talk about being Mormon, or like, if here's the Quran, read the Quran, or here's a book against how religion isn't a thing, it's just a social construct. It's like we're so confident because of the way we raised our children that we're not worried about that. It's like, now we have been the ones who've programmed our children. So, all that being said, I think it's great. And we do more of an unschool. And because I don't want to bring the school system into our household of, you're going to sit for 6 hours, you're going to read for X amount of hours, you're going over math for X amount of hours, and science. And um, we completely unschool. So, like, when we
so
go to the
define
grocery,
unschool really quick. Well, so what is
so I don't want them to be in a system. So think of it more of the entrepreneurial route. It's
mm-hmm.
so different than I'm singular focused on, like, just having a 9 to 5. Because, like, yeah, you might be the COO and you're technically an employee, but from what I've seen, it's like you and Ryan have gone on this mission as entrepreneurs to build what you guys have. And now you guys are looked at as like, well, you guys are, I don't know if you guys are K2s or W9s or
Mm-hmm.
W2s, or,
For sure.
I'm assuming it's that first one, but
Mm-hmm.
no, it's K1.
Oh yeah. So,
But
so I technically, so I get a percentage of revenue from all the businesses, but
yeah,
I am paid as a W-2, right?
okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then you're getting some sort of like shares, but there was a point where it's like, we're going on this entrepreneurial journey,
For sure.
right? So you at least get that. So it's a different mindset of, we want them to learn life skills. So when we go to the grocery store, my oldest, who, he's under 9, he pays. And it's like,
Well,
when people look at me, I'm like, why are you looking at me? I'm not even standing in front of the counter. Like, he goes, he pays, he's counting the money, he's counting the change, and it takes a while. But I don't care.
I
I don't
love it.
care about anyone behind them, because I want him to learn to look them in the eye and talk to them. And he's handing out the cash or using the debit card, depending on where we're going. But I'll, like, get out cash just for that stuff.
That's awesome.
So he can, yeah, so he can learn that. Or I take him to a lot of meetings with me. I've kind of pulled a little, like, Grant Cardone thing, where he was taking his daughters to conferences and meetings. And I just have the thing. It's like, obviously our working relationship's not going to work that well if you care that my older son's here, he's not rambunctious. He understands the concept of, like, this is serious, and he wants to just, like, listen and stuff, versus my a 3-year old who, he's like, I'm ready to just go to the park. I saw a park across the street. Let's go.
Yeah.
He's a little bit older, but I take him to things. I want him to learn real world life lessons, because this school system's been the same for a century, and it's just a factory to just put out workers and to just go with the flow. I want my son to question why the government's telling him to do something. It's like, well, there's always another way.
For sure. Yeah. You want to create free thinkers. And I think the best
Yes.
way to do that is through, I mean, you guiding them and you
Mm-hmm.
being the best teacher possible. Um, And so, yeah, what are your thoughts on like these like, so you don't have a set curriculum, or is there like a company that you like pull stuff from, or how does that work?
Both really. So we do a CC, which is classical conversations. It's a Christian based one. It's a
That's
lot of
awesome.
audio. So like if they're playing with Legos, they're listening to this, and it'll be like on history, on science, um,
Got
or
it.
if we're like driving to wrestling practice, they'll just listen to those stories because we don't do a lot. We don't really do screens, so they're not watching anything. But they really are into reading. So whatever they're really into is like what we're trying to push. Like the older one, he's into. We do a lot of sports. We do a lot of sports, but he's really into building. So it's like subscription of Legos, but that
Mm.
are way over his age because even near his age is just too easy. So everything we buy is they're like 18 and up, which those ones get spendy. But
I
he will just bust them out, and then it's like, okay, you completely made it correct. How can you make something that looks like this over here with the Legos you got? And then it's like, okay, reinforcing some of that creativity, some of that is engineering stuff. He likes to take things apart, put it back together. Like he just randomly is like taking apart the vacuum cleaner, screwdriver, drills, the whole bit. And then just like, oh wow, this is what it looks like taken apart. It's like, I hope you remember where everything goes.
That's sweet.
Yeah, because whatever that they're into, it's like, why would we not just like push them all into that and like
For sure.
truly be supportive?
Yeah, and I tell entrepreneurs this all the time. I'm like, don't try to improve upon your weaknesses. Just double down on your strengths. And I think that's important as a parent and just with kids. Like, if your kid's really good at something or takes an interest in something, just pour into that thing. Don't
Mm-hmm.
make them try to go get better at math or whatever it might be. Right?
Yeah,
Just pour into their creativity, and I think you're going to get a way deeper, way better skilled kid, I guess is the best way I can put it.
yeah. And I've heard Hormozy say the same thing. He's like, if I don't have these skills, it's going to take too much time and resources for me to learn those. So why wouldn't I just partner up with someone who has those skills? And I just keep focusing on my skills, the thing I'm good at. So I'm in complete agreement with that. And that's what we do with our boys. It's like if he has ugly handwriting, I don't care. Most people email and text. And they can work on that over time if it's something they have an interest in. But the things that they're interested in, it's like we're going all in on that.
For sure. Are there any things that you're like really focused on as a dad? Like these are the things that I really want to like hammer into my kids right now.
Yeah, being the best possible husband I can be.
Mm, why?
Statistically, they'll have the exact same marriage.
Interesting.
So statistically, we all have the same marriage our parents have. And I will talk to men through my coaching program who will say, no, no, I'm nothing like my dad. He's like this. And it's like, okay, well, tell me more, like what's mom like? And then you come to find out they're exactly like their mom. It's like, okay, so you have the same marriage and you married the female version of your dad from how I
Mm,
heard about your dad and now how I'm hearing about how your wife is. You married your dad and you are just like your mom. Or a male is exactly like his dad and he essentially married his mom. And now there's going to be like little things that we do that are different. And if you're not consciously aware, then most likely you're mirroring it way more than you think. Unless you're like really like a thinker like you or Ryan, where or where we're really trying to just come into ourself and just be ourself and be different and take a different path in life. But that's usually like the less than 3%, the 1% of people.
for
Everyone else
sure.
kind of just goes with the flow and the programming that they were raised with.
And how difficult is it for somebody to change or break the mold? I know it's a lot of people that you work with, but like how much effort and like how quickly can somebody start improving upon those things so if they don't like the type of marriage that their parents had?
I think so. If they're aware of it, one, but two, if someone who they trust points it out, I think that we need to be adaptable. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived and got to the point in society as we have. But it's that there's that little part of our central nervous system that goes, "This is not comfortable." And as soon as you just push through that little bit of, because it's like a survival state of us changing any part of our environment, as soon as you get through that, then you can make those positive changes.
Mm,
But there's going to be a part of your CNS that's going to be like, this is different. And it's going to be kind of those first red flares that like go up.
that makes sense. And like with in your experience, why do you think that men struggle with being a leader in their family? Like, because I know that's a lot of things that you work on.
Yeah. Because we don't have fathers who teach men how to be good at being men. It's,
Mm,
to me, that's simple. We've gone forever. We were in tribes, bands of men, brotherhoods, whatever you want to call it. We were communal people. And then we went to an individualistic society. So there's no men who, what is it, like Proverbs 27:17? That's like iron sharpens iron as one man sharpens another.
yep.
That's supposed to be an uncomfortable thing. We flaunt it as like, you're learning something good, I'm learning something good, you're making money, I'm making money because we're part of his circle. But the iron sharpening iron's actually supposed to be something that's really uncomfortable, because you don't
Mm,
sharpen iron, you sharpen it with a watering stone, which is really smooth. And then the
mm,
iron is friction. So the friction is being brutally honest. Like, Javi, dude, you're fucking up. You should not be treating your wife that way. And you doing the same thing, Jesse. I don't think that you're doing this right. Like, you're slacking right now, man. Like, the uncomfortable truths that's really out of love. So when men don't have that, they're not holding each other accountable. There's a lack of growth. And then, like, how are we discipling our children intentionally, especially our sons, going through any sort of rite of passage? Like, throughout all ancient times, there's been a rite of passage amongst men. And how do we define what it is to be good at being a man? And do we show our sons what that is? Do we show them what emotional intelligence is, what it means to actually lead the household? We haven't for a handful of generations. It's just that you figure it out. Magic fairy dust gets dropped on you one day, and you're supposed to know what it means to be a man. But men just don't teach their sons that.
for sure. And I think there's a lot of, I won't call it misinformation, but there's a lot of just different views of what it means to be a man, right? Like you got, and I think it's gotten cheapened over the years with like this, like alpha male red pill type movement, right? Which I don't think that like you're necessarily a part of. Like there are elements of those things for sure, but like overall, like this idea of like toxic masculinity, right? Um, True masculinity is like the opposite of toxic, right? Like you can be compassionate, you can care about your wife, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't like no, your wife isn't just there to serve you, right? One of the things that I really really like is this idea of like submission, right? The true meaning, like so, submit, like if you break it down, it means that like somebody is following a mission, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
if your wife isn't quote submitting to you, like your mission probably isn't big enough, and the way that you lead probably isn't worth following, right? So like if you as a man feel like why am I having these issues with my wife? It's like probably because you're not leading very well, to be honest,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not actually like no your track record has to warrant um, somebody wanting to follow you is the point that I'm getting at, right? And I guess like for a lot of men, I know that some people struggle with that, but like if you don't have a track record of leading your wife well or taking care of her, like why would she want to quote submit or like just be along for the ride? Period.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that I think about a lot, and a lot of like the men that I talk to struggle with. We actually had that same conversation in our Bible study last week.
Yeah. And it's it's funny because I notice it a lot in like Bible study groups
Mm-hmm.
and like men who go to church on Sunday, where they are actually not in that leadership role. Their wife takes on the more masculine role in the household,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, man, I feel like it's all right there. It's in the book. It's all there because I mean, what is it?
So,
Ephesians 5:21 talks about how we both submit to the reverence of Christ. And then I
mm-hmm.
think it's 5:25 that says, wives shall submit to their husbands as we submit to the church. But then a little bit down says men need to love their wife as Christ loved the church and died for her.
Mm-hmm. That's the part that people leave out, or that
Yeah,
men feeling
that
leave
men
out.
leave out. Yeah,
That second part.
yeah,
Yeah, because again, if your wife doesn't feel like you would actually like you would die for her, and you don't live that way, and again, this also means just through serving, like again, providing for her, doing all the other things that you would do, like again, if as the same way Christ loved the church, right? Then of course the first part isn't going to happen where she's not going to want to submit to you,
yeah. No,
right? And so that's what I always ask people, because like literally the question that they had in the Bible says like, how do I get my wife to submit to me? And I was like, well, like, are you doing the second part? Are you treating her the way where she feels like, yeah, you would actually go die for her, and then that means a lot of different things, but um, yeah, it is always interesting. So, like, what tips would you have for somebody who feels like their wife isn't or is operating in that masculine role? Like, how can somebody start to change that dynamic?
well, he's gonna have to figure out how to lead and what does that actually mean. And I've told people like, go find that like 75-year-old old man or 80-year-old man who you see still walking and holding hands with his wife around the block like every morning at like 5. Like, just go and talk to him because he's probably figured it out by now if they're still happily holding hands and walking around the block. Um, but it goes back to like kind of how you were saying like what is the masculinity, because we kind of didn't touch on that, but
Mm-hmm.
you pointed out how there's a lot of that there's the ability to be soft though for your wife when it comes to masculinity. And I completely agree, because if we go back in history, we needed to be able to be so emotionally available that they didn't have elevated cortisol levels, which would allow them to want to continue to breed,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the only way to continue our legacy, right? If we go back thousands and thousands of years, if you didn't and the women were stressed and you were this more of a barbarian, it's you're only thinking of instant gratification and you're not thinking of the long game, because the masculine man plays the long game. So it's like, how do I allow the women and children to feel the most safe and secure?
Mm-hmm.
So now wrapping that into the leadership part, it's like, well, let's see, does your wife feel like emotionally safe and secure? That's one of them. Not just physically, but like, is your wife making these decisions? Like, are you being passive? Like, you can meet a couple, and I'm sure you see couples all the time where it's like, oh, she's the masculine one in the relationship, and we're called to be complementary of one another. And when he wants her to be submissive, it's like, well, are you in such a masculine state? It allows her to go into her femininity and just kind of Disney-esque fall into your arms because she feels so safe and secure physically and emotionally. Like, are you someone worth following and worth submitting because of the vision that you lay out and the trust? And because women only look for, not only, their main thing they look for is like a man with potential and then safety and security.
Mm-hmm.
How do I become safe and secure? It's biological. And if you aren't truly leading and understanding where her emotions are, like, can you tell where her emotional triggers are? Is she starting to build up emotional anxiety because you're aware of maybe the top 3 things that where she doesn't feel emotionally safe and secure? Maybe the fridge just isn't full of food, and in her mind, in another lifetime, in a past lifetime, she was such a peasant that she's like, this starts to give me a little bit of anxiety. And you beat her to the punch and go, hey, if you want, how about we do like a date later and we go to the store, we go to Costco, we go to whatever it is, Whole Foods, and we go shopping and completely relieve it. Because you might be fine with all the steak in the fridge or the freezer,
Hmm.
but she just likes and feels good with the fridge being completely full. And you might think that that's something small, but it's being aware of those emotional triggers, because you can't truly lead a woman if you're not even aware of her emotional triggers, the little things that give her the emotional anxiety. It's like you have to nip those in the butt before they start to build. Like that's part of your leadership.
100%. And yeah, I guess if I could boil it down to like just one sentence, just make your wife feel safe.
Yeah,
If you can make your wife feel safe emotionally, financially, physically, you're fine. Yeah,
yeah,
and
because
you,
men think it's just a physical one, and it's
yeah,
like no, no, no. You got these other ones too.
yeah. And transparently, I mean, the physical one used to be the most important, right? Like if we go thousands and thousands
Mhm.
of years,
Or even
but
just the Oregon Trail, which was less than
yeah,
150 years
yeah, you're
ago.
right. And
Yeah.
again, you don't have to go that far back, but in our cushy, and again, things can change at any point, so I
Mhm.
acknowledge that. But in our cushy life, really, the emotional piece is the one that's more important these days.
Yeah.
Obviously, as a man, you should be able to defend yourself and defend your family. I fully acknowledge and agree that with that. But in the day to day life, the emotional maturity and the emotional safety, I think, actually is more important, because
Hmm.
that's what comes up when I come home every day, and I gotta make sure that she feels loved and safe, and I hear her out, and we make sure that again she can just be more vulnerable, and I'm there and I'm receptive to those things. I think is more important these days,
Hmm.
just because that's what comes up on a daily basis.
Yeah. No, I'm in complete agreement. And
Yeah.
I
So I
think
mean,
it's something that's not taught. It's something that men aren't, aware of. I see guys with fucking millions, a million followers or half a million followers who are like, if my girl has an attitude and she doesn't tell me what's wrong, I'm going back to playing video games or working on my business. Like, I don't care. You lost your opportunity. And I'm like, any guy who listens to this dude, you're setting yourself up for failure. I
for
promise you.
sure. Well, and that's the problem too, though, because then it also no woman who is worth being with
Hmm.
um, is going to be with somebody like that. So it's actually it's a vicious cycle, because
Yeah.
the man now is treating their partner poorly, and the only person that's going to stay in that type of relationship is somebody that's okay being treated poorly, and then they wonder why the relationship isn't working out, or they're like, "Ah, man, all women suck," or "All women just want XYZ." I'm like, well, I mean, it kind of goes both ways. Like I know, like for me personally, like my wife, when we met early on, like she set certain standards, and it was almost subconsciously, right? She just from a very early point, she knew how she was going, what she was going to accept in terms of a relationship, and that not to ever say that I was like a bad guy or anything, but like she just like I knew how I was going to treat her
Hmm.
because of the way she showed up, and like I know that she wouldn't have put up with any of those like people, or like if I would have acted in that way very early on, she would have been out of there because she knew what her worth was, and I think that's another important piece of this too, right? Where like yeah, as a man, like if you're gonna subscribe to those types of people, your dating pool is going like the quality of your dating pool goes down significantly as well. Right? And I don't think
Hmm.
that's really talked about on the other side too.
Yeah, and I mean, I got a couple questions for you. One, it's like, where do you think she learned though to hold those herself to those standards? And then two, it's like these terms, high value man, high value woman, are thrown around a lot on social media,
Mhm.
but there's a lot to that. Like, there's a lot of truth to it.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because
I
like
mean,
the example is your wife. She's holding herself to a certain standard, therefore she's not putting up with that. So it like adds to the value.
yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, to your first question, um, she was in a pretty abusive relationship early on in her like life. So from like met the guy in high school, and then they early college, and like like physically abusive and stuff like that. And I think people who are in those like in those types of relationships, they have two options, right? Like they either fall into this vicious cycle of like that is what love is, and that's what they end up accepting. And with my wife, she took the other option, and she was like, "No, like I will never ever put up with those things again." I acknowledge what these red flags are. I did work on myself to um, I acknowledge that there were things that I did, and domestic violence is never okay. But she's like, I accepted those things, and there were red flags earlier on that I could have noticed that I am now going to watch out for.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't date for a really long time. Then once she was in the like, she started to date. She was pretty quick to be like, nope, like I don't like that. I don't like this, and like these are the things that I'm gonna um, I guess watch out for is a good way to
Mm-hmm.
put it, or acknowledge. So I think one, she did the work on herself for a few
Mm-hmm.
years to like I really like heal those wounds and like understand herself really really well to become more emotionally intelligent. Um, and then once she decided to start dating again, I think she knew a lot more what she was looking for.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then what was your second question?
Oh, my second one was just more of a comment on, like the
Oh,
terms
high
high
value men
value
and women.
man, high value
Yeah, I
women,
mean,
but
like I
there's,
think the conversation gets short, really short, right? Because like people are like, "Oh, what's a high value man?" Well, it's six figures, he's in shape, and
mhm,
whatever, right? And but I think there's so much more to that. Yeah,
yeah,
sure, right? Like a high value man is a provider, right? I think that is a prerequisite, and I think a provider can mean different things to different people. But at the end of the day, like you will provide for your family. You make them feel emotionally safe. I think that like if you have those things, I would consider you a high value man. But then the other side of it is like, are you able to be emotionally intelligent and actually cultivate a good relationship? Because there are tons and tons of men who can be financial providers, but they can't cultivate like a good flourishing and happy relationship. And I would say the same
mhm,
thing for women, right? There's tons of beautiful women, and there's tons of really, really, um, people who would be considered a high value woman, make great money or whatever your definition of a high value woman is. But I think emotional maturity is and intelligence is really what helps make you a high value person on either side.
oh, I agree. I usually push back on more of the provider part because people are going to have a job regardless.
Yeah,
It's like you're going to have a job regardless, if
for
you're
sure.
married or if you're not married. Um, so it's like we can't hang our hat on that one too much. Uh,
Yeah.
But the reason I brought it up was because you were talking about your wife and how she set a standard for
Mm-hmm.
herself, and then the women who you attract. If this is the attitude you have towards women, you're going to you said like you're going to limit your pool. The quality of the women you're going to attract is going to go down. And if a man says he wants a high value woman, it's like, well, those things aren't going to get you one, and we have to be aware. We're following guys like this on social media. It's like you're treating them women XYZ this way. You're attracting a woman who just doesn't have very much self-esteem to begin with, regardless of how good looking, because looks is a genetic lottery. It's
Yeah.
like me and you didn't put in the gym to get the facial structure that we have. It's just like,
Yeah.
what? Woke up one day, was this handsome. Thank you, Jesus, that I got a good genetic lottery. But it's like, what are all the other pieces or all the other tools that we bring to the table? You
For
know,
sure.
my wife was, I guess, similar to yours in a way where she had a criteria
Mm-hmm.
and she had a high bar. But and when it's like, where do you get that from? She got it from her grandmother. Her
Mm.
grandmother had her mom when she was way older. Her mom's the youngest. She has like siblings are 20 years older than her. For context, her grandmother's still alive. She's 98.
Wow.
So she'd been around for a while. She would tell her as a child, like, never let a man do this, never let a man see you like this, never go in public, not well kept. Like, she would tell her all these things. And in the beginning of us dating, those things that she instilled in her were annoying. But now it's like, no one has ever seen my wife in sweats out in public. Like, nobody. Like, when my wife does the homeschool things, it's like, she's the most, like, she's always well kept. She's always like presentable versus like, you'll just, and that, I mean, I am kind of bagging on one hand. It's like all the other moms look like they just rolled out of bed looking frumpy. And like,
For
she
sure.
just had it instilled that it's like, no, you have to present yourself a certain way always. And then she would hold these like dating standards. When I first started dating her, she like had standards, which
Mhm.
it's like, man. And on one hand, in another lifetime, it's like, you almost want to, like, you would pay to be like, women, you should do this because it's going to benefit you in the long term. But they
Mhm.
don't. And we have this culture that's really kind of the opposite, where women aren't holding themselves to high standards,
Yeah,
which
well,
is
I think it goes
unfortunate.
both ways. I agree. Women aren't, but I think men aren't either.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So like, I think both for sure, and it's tough. And yeah, I think right. Like just the definition of a standard is like your minimum acceptable behavior, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So the minimums have gotten so low, and it's I mean it's no one's fault. It just is, right? Like just with the hookup culture, with dating apps and stuff like that, which in a past life, like I did those things. And yeah, it's just like what the standard of what both men and women are willing to accept in terms of like relationship, and it's just it's still going down. So it's I feel for people out there,
Mm-hmm.
but I think also that is why there's a rise and a resurgence and a revival happening with Christianity, because people are searching for something and they're realizing that like this ain't it. I think last year was the first like uptick in new people coming to faith, that the Christian faith, I think in like the last like 6 or 7 years or something like that. If
I've
I
heard
remember,
something similar.
yeah, and Gen Z is leading the charge, which is so funny because again, I think they're just realizing like no, like we've swung so far this direction that this just isn't what life is all cracked up. This is what life is supposed to be. I think is what
Mm-hmm.
people are realizing, and yeah, so I think that's amazing.
No, me too. The One of the reasons why I started doing the podcast is because me kind of getting more into social media, I would see influential men amongst young men telling them to do things that I just was like, I feel like this is terrible. You know, sleep with as many women as you can, make sure you're making as much money as you can before you ever get married.
Mm-hmm.
And just things, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that ain't very good. Like,
No, I mean it's the most unfulfilling thing ever
mm-hmm,
because there's always another dollar to be made. There's always another girl. It'll never be enough. Like if those are the only two things that you value, and unfortunately, that's what like most young men like they think that is success, right? Because of these influencers and because of this other stuff, but like there it'll never be enough. And that's the problem with that thinking is like you will never be satisfied. Um, and it's a terrible place to be because the crazy part is the more that you get it, the less fulfilling it becomes.
mm-hmm,
And that's something that I think like all men should know that try to like pursue those things. It's literally like no, it's a drug. It's because you're when you're pursuing success or you're pursuing money. Like the first time you buy something nice, it's really really cool. The second time you buy something nice, it's like all right, this is sick. And then but then eventually like it it loses the luster. And I would compare that to the same thing with if you want to go sleep around or if you want to go um, do whatever. It's literally the exact same thing. It
Mm-hmm.
just gets less and less fulfilling the more that you do it, which is sad.
Yeah, I have a good buddy who's won a couple gold medals in the Olympics who once told me the most crowded place in a marriage is the bedroom. And
Mm,
I was like, yeah, that sucks because in high school and college, I was not into drinking. I was not into drugs.
mm,
I was into hanging out with girls. So,
yeah.
and he was right. Like there's
Yep.
the whole like first half of me dating my wife, there was so many like insecurities around that topic. And
Hmm.
it took a while and like all those have vanished. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of those have vanished, but in the beginning and for a long time, and even when we were like married, there would be jokes if we'd be watching a movie. It's like, oh, that's she's your type, your girlfriend's on TV, and then it's had to just like nip in the butt. It's like that's not inappropriate. We used to joke about that. We shouldn't anymore.
Hmm.
But it all stemmed from the sleeping around the background of that.
For sure. Yeah. And that's like, there's so much healing that has to happen if you do end up sleeping around, you might not even know. It's just you got to start like doing that internal work and like, yo, like why are these things triggering me in a relationship? So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think um, it's so destructive and you don't even know it.
It is.
And then like it, and then well, one of the things that I've heard recently is like, sin feels like freedom until you try to quit. Right. And then, so that's the same thing with whether it be sleeping around, whether it be drinking, partying, even, putting too much value on making money. Right. Like it's all the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you'd be surprised how much of a hold it has on you.
Yeah. What are we idolizing?
Hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, man. So I guess how does somebody make that transition? Right. You got somebody who's some guy who's put so much value on these things for so long. How do you start to unlearn those things?
Well, I believe through like, your identity. What's your identity? Is it something that can be taken away? Um, and are you filled with joy? Because happiness is fleeting. And
Mm,
I believe a masculine man looks long term, and there's no instant gratification in that. When it comes to money, I use this old, I think, like Jim Rohn quote that, like, it's up there with oxygen. It's pretty important,
yep.
So I don't want to ever harp on anyone who is like, I mean, I'm a guy who I want to be worth millions and millions. Okay.
Same. Yeah, for
All
sure.
right. Um, but it's like if all of it's stripped away from you one night, you're sitting there, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's taking away from you. The government comes and goes, you're homeless, which literally has happened throughout history, literally could happen tomorrow to somebody. It's like, who are you as a man, though?
Hmm.
Like, can that be taken away? Because if it can, then you're never going to be on a strong foundation in life. You're going to be on something that's shaky. So, where is your identity? Are you filled with joy no matter what happens? And then, are you truly playing the long game?
Love that. Yeah, and the joy piece is so important um, because if you can find joy in any situation, like you said, right? Like happiness is fleeting, but true like joy when things aren't going your way, right? I don't know the scripture exactly, right? But um, I consider it pure joy when you go through trials and tribulations, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
because those are the things that make you stronger, and like that's all adding to your story. Is the way I look at it, at least.
Yeah.
And that's typically where the most growth happens too, is during those trials. And I'm sure like you've heard this stat before too, but it's like um, when you like there's this thing where if you are just doing a little bit not as well as like you could be, you actually end up working harder than if you would, and in a better place than if you would have just been even keel, right? Like the comfortable person stays pretty flat, and actually, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Mm-hmm.
But like when you are actually just a little like backed into a corner a little bit, like you actually end up in a better position most times than you would have if you were just in a like comfortable position, which I think is so
Mm-hmm.
interesting.
Yeah.
You know, the necessity sparks innovation for sure.
Yeah. It's that mouse study of the mouse in the little pool, and
Mm-hmm.
then how long they're willing to swim.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's great. Yeah, man. I think that that's for most men. I said I think that I think about the most, and I love that you brought it up earlier, where you were saying, um, you know, a masculine man thinks long term. I have never thought more long term until I had my baby. I always was like, yeah, like I'm setting myself up for the future. I'm setting myself up for the future, but like you don't really like even when my wife was pregnant, I was like, okay, like starting to think about it, starting to think about it, but then like you really like the second I looked at it, I was like, oh, dude, like legacy, like what type of life am I going to set up for her?
Mm-hmm.
Like your mindset shifts completely. And I thought like that was one of the coolest thing, like yeah, just the most interesting thing about becoming a dad is like the way you think about the world shifts significantly. Before I was like thinking long term for like yeah, like my like I want to live on an island somewhere, you know, take vacations and all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But like now it's just way different. It's like you know, what type of like how can I provide for not only her but her kids and all that stuff, right? You know, a wise man provides for his children's children.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been the biggest shift for me, which I think is really is like it's been cool.
Can you unpack that even more?
Um, in what way?
Just the how the long term vision has changed with
Yeah, I
the
mean, so
child.
like it's gone from you know I obviously you know being in this position I want like just like you said you know I want to make millions. I want to make millions of millions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and but now it's like hey, like I need to start do like for example, we run a real estate business, and as you know, but now I'm doing my own personal deals on the side, and I'm like, all right, this next one's just going straight to her name's Santana, going straight to Santana, like and her fund, right? Like so, I'm
Mm-hmm.
just thinking about like how can I keep on building um, for her right now, and then how can I make that like I'm just like okay, like if my personal plan is, you know, this first house flip is going to go to her, and then I'm going to take that money, and then that's just going to be a whole separate little fund, and then I'm going to keep growing that in conjunction with everything else that I'm doing, right? And so it's just like, how can I keep doing things and really making like by the time she's 18 like really have some sizable cash for her ready to go, and then ideally like that just turns into like a family trust, and then I'm still going to do all my other real estate stuff and all the things I'm doing with Ryan, like that's like the today money, but I'm really trying to think about how can I build like an actual little side fund that's growing every year just for her. So thinking about that, also obviously like thinking about things like homeschool, thinking about things like you know how can I just prep her for the future. Small side note, that is like one of the things that we're trying to build on the wealthy side is we're trying to exit in like in 2 to 3 years. We want to build this thing up and sell for 100 million and go sell it to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and after that, Ryan also wants to tackle the homeschool market and like go do like a curriculum and all this other stuff. So
Oh,
um,
cool.
yeah, so that's something that we're like thinking about doing. And I'm like, yeah, like even that idea is me just thinking about her future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
just like you said very early on, like I want to be in control of what my child consumes and what my child learns. So what better way than like just not only getting a curriculum, but just like being the curriculum, right? And like, well, what are
Yep.
the things that I would want to teach her? So, um, yeah, those are the main things that I'm really thinking about. It's always like before they were just concepts, but now it's like, dude, like I can't wait. I gotta start doing stuff now and have that like a sense of urgency.
Yeah. No, it is cool the transformation from when when you become a father.
Yeah. And they say statistically that, and this might be like one of those things where it might not be the true cause, but statistically, most men become millionaires after they have children. That could be just because of an age thing, but I also think there's definitely this element of like, all right, no, like the game's real. Like let's make this stuff happen now versus a few years from now or whatever.
Yeah, statistically, married men with children make more money than all other men in all other categories.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For sure. Well, and the same thing we talked about earlier, like right, like I wouldn't be able to have my wife stay home if I wasn't making enough money to cover both of our expenses and still live the life that we're
Mm-hmm.
accustomed to living, right? I would be like, hey, babe, like we got to make some sacrifices or something if I um, if I wasn't in a financial place. So I think like we talked about money a few times, and I think it is close to oxygen because you need money to have options. You need money to
Mm-hmm.
be able to afford.
Yeah.
I don't know how much the homeschool curriculum is, but you got to be able to afford that. Sports are expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Gear is expensive. You still want to be able to take your wife out on nice dinners and stuff like that. Like that requires money, and so the first thing is you got to have a good skill. You got to acquire a good skill to uh, a high earning skill, and because I think it all stems from that. Unfortunately, I wish it wasn't that way, but it just is. That's life. Um, so that's kind of the first step in everything.
Yeah, man, I'm with you on that. I am, and I feel like this somehow turned. You've been asking me more questions, and
Yeah, I mean, I
you
just kind of
turned
keep the conversation going, man. Because
you kind of
I
flipped
also
the
ask these
tables.
things for me, right? Like I'm a new
Uh-huh.
dad, so I'm just thinking, like, hey, like, am I doing the right things? And so that's why I
Yeah,
was asking questions. So no, that's good.
I mean, I'll ask you a bunch of questions about, and
Yeah.
if you want, we don't even have to air some of these. But I'm curious of how
No, please.
you guys are raising a little one. Um, is mom a fan of co-sleeping or no?
Oh, yeah, this is a good question. So being our first, my
Mm-hmm.
wife is her name's Sam. Sam's so she was so nervous about everything, and understand me too, right? Like I did not sleep a wink that first night, or even the first like couple weeks. But we invested in like it's called the Snoo. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like this automatic bassinet rocker thing. Game changer, by the way. And so like that rocks her to sleep. But so we weren't co-sleeping for the first like few months.
Uh-huh.
Literally last week though, um, our baby got COVID, and so that was one of the scariest moments. She's only two. She was like 2.5 months old,
Uh-huh.
and we're like, oh my god, like what's going on? Took like had a fever, took her to the ER, the whole thing. But she was like so sick, and I didn't want her just sleeping on her back, so we started co-sleeping last week. So I'd have her on like all night, like, and we're both pretty light sleepers, and we're both in pretty good shape. People typically
Mm-hmm.
say, hey, they don't want you to co-sleep or whatever because you might roll on the baby or something. I'm like, that ain't gonna happen. Knock on wood. But so we just started co-sleeping like literally a week ago. And we kind of mix like right. So we do
Mm-hmm.
still put her in the bassinet because transparently like her and I sleep better that way. But if she's like fussy or whatever, yeah, we'll throw her in the bed and she'll sleep with us.
Gotcha. Yeah, I am. I am definitely not co-sleep police.
Yeah.
My wife co-sleeps with both of our sons.
Yeah, and as she's getting older, I think we're like she'll start co-sleeping more.
Mm-hmm.
It was just I think again just being a brand new parent, both she's like everything was scary, but actually I part of the silver lining with her getting COVID is like we are way less scared of like sickness and like we tackled the first time like her getting sick and handling that because I think that was a big fear of hers and honestly mine too, right? Like
Uh-huh.
it was slightly scary for a moment.
Do
Um,
you express those fears around your wife, or is it
um,
more internal? You're like
After
inside.
the
You're like,
fact,
oh shit.
I
Okay,
mean, dude,
after.
like so for the so the crazy part is like so I had like a small sore throat and I didn't think anything of it. And then like a week later, so I was, yeah, I brought it home from the office, and like I didn't think I was sick or anything. I didn't even, I barely even mentioned it to my wife. And then my wife goes to a workout class. I'm hanging out with the baby, and I'm like, she feels really warm. And we take her temperature, it's like 102-degree fever. And so my wife's gone. I'm freaking out at this point. Like I'm like, whoa, my god, like what's going on? I'm chat GPTing like crazy. I'm like, and I was like, yeah, to take her to the hospital right away. And I'm like, oh, so internally I'm freaking out. I text my wife like so I just want to take her right away. I was like, hey, like don't worry, Santana's a fever. I'm taking her to the hospital. I'll meet you there after your class or whatever. And once so the whole drive there, I'm freaking out. But once my wife was there, like I was like, no, I gotta show up, gotta be strong. So like,
Yeah.
I'm chilling at that point. And then so the whole time I'm like, it's gonna be fine, don't worry, consoling her. After the fact, once after we had that blown over, the fever was pretty much gone. It was like 2-3 days later. Then I told her, yeah, babe, I was pretty worried. But I think in that moment, she needed me to be strong. So yeah, so like yeah. So to answer your question, I'm for sure vulnerable with her afterwards, and I'll tell her like, hey, like I felt some type of way, 2-3 days later, but it's not going to help if I'm also freaking out. Yeah, no way.
Yeah, you were just being humble and honest.
Yeah, exactly, right. And I think it's part of that vulnerability piece, right? Like, because we had we were kind of just, I guess, debriefing afterwards. We're like, yeah, like that was pretty crazy. And then she asked me, she's like, "Were you worried?" And I was like, "Yeah." I think it was a perfectly reasonable thing to be worried about, and I think that just you got to pick and choose when you're going to be vulnerable. I think women say that men want somebody to be that's vulnerable all the time, but I don't think they. I don't think that's really necessarily what they're saying. I think yes, they want someone to be more vulnerable, but at like in control and also at specific times. I think is really at least what's worked for me in my experience.
What to you is a definition of vulnerability?
I think being able to express how you're feeling about a particular topic, I would consider being vulnerable, right? So we'll use this example. Um, Afterwards, when she asked me, like, "Hey, like, how were you feeling?" I was like, "Yeah, like, I was really scared, like, in that moment." But I was able to do it after the fact, right? Like, I think most, like, what I perceive as what women want when they say I want a man that's vulnerable, they're talking about their feelings immediately, and like right, like something makes them angry or makes a man sad, and like they bring it up right away, right? And or in a way that's not controlled, I guess is a good way to put it, right? Like they're just um, immediately firing off with their emotions. Like I wouldn't consider that good vulnerability. That's being vulnerable, but I don't think that's what us as a man should be doing, right? I think you can communicate how you feel, but it has to be in in a more even keel type of way, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like you have control of your emotions, right? I think vulnerability from a woman when she's operating in a feminine way is, she's just like feeling expressed. At least that's how my wife is, right? Like immediately. But as a man, I don't think we have that luxury. If that's my personal belief. What do you think?
Well, one, I think social media has kind of redefined the word vulnerability, because if you actually look up the definition, it's to put oneself in physical harm. So Forrest Gump, when he was saving Bubba, he's vulnerable. A baby chick
Sure.
without its mother is vulnerable. If there's a fortress and there's a hole in the wall around the fortress, that fortress is vulnerable because there's a hole in the wall. And social media, again, because it's women telling men to be vulnerable, this definition has completely kind of been distorted a little bit. And the reason I asked the definition is because I've heard you bring it up a couple of times. But I challenge men to not use that word unless you're going to war, or you're, literally putting yourself in physical harm.
Interesting.
I
Makes
tell
sense.
men, it's like, hey, there's nothing wrong with being open and honest, or being humble, because people, if you're admitting you don't know something, is that being vulnerable, or is that just being like humble? Is there like
Mhm.
humility? What you said though about women wanting men to be vulnerable, I don't think women want men to be vulnerable at all. I think it puts them in a fight or flight, unless you say it's like the context where later that situation is over and you're just being honest of, yeah, I was scared.
Mhm.
But in the moment, you had to hold it together. You couldn't tell her, I don't know what to do. Like,
Yeah. Oh my
you
God.
know,
What's going on?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Women don't want that. Like, they don't. It's going to
Mhm.
put them in a fight or flight. Cortisol levels are just going to go through the roof. They're not going to feel safe and secure. They're going to feel like they're going to have to take on the leadership role. And then what does she think subconsciously, like moving forward?
For sure. Yeah, that and like it's just if my husband couldn't handle this situation, what makes me think
Yeah.
that he can handle the next situation that comes up or
Mm,
whatever, right? And then again, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier. Like those things then consciously or subconsciously add up and they're like, well, like why would I want to follow this man?
mm,
And again, it might not come out in those words, but like subconsciously, that's when you start getting into these situations where a woman just operates in her masculine. So yeah, I agree. That's where like as a man and back to not just being a provider financially, but a provider like emotionally, right? And being able
mm.
to let her know that she's going to be taken care of in those situations, right? And you don't have to have all the answers, but you just got to like be calm if
Yeah.
anything.
I ask men of faith all the time. It's like, show me the example in the Bible where Jesus was quick to anger, where
Mm-hmm.
he lost his cool, where he, you know, X, Y, Z. All
Mm-hmm.
the show me.
For sure.
And if there's ever a situation that might have tempted him, you know what he does? He doesn't allow it to happen. He says, I'm going to step away and I'm going to go pray to the Father. And he comes
So cool.
back and he's just calm, cool, and collected. People tried to literally stone him and he stayed calm, cool, and collected.
Yep.
When they arrested him, he was calm, cool, and collected. The Roman guards put a robe on him and spit on him.
Calm, cool,
They're
collected.
hitting him in the head with a staff. He was calm, cool, and collected. So how do we as men model that in like all of the situations? It doesn't mean we don't have emotions, because emotions are good. But in the events, how do we, try our best to just be like Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
And,
Absolutely.
there's always the example like he flipped tables in the temple. It's like, but before he did that, he was not quick to anger. He sat there methodically. He wove a whip, went in there, and it was a demonstration based off principle of what they were doing. I am capable.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't an instant reaction. He thought about what he was going to do.
Yep. And it wasn't, um, yeah, like you said, it was basically premeditated and it was controlled the whole time too.
Controlled. It wasn't in
Yep.
a rage.
Yep.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's And then when you like point out all those things, it's like, oh, I guess he didn't do all the things, act like how I act 90% of the time in my own home.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. And I think the biggest test that, I mean, just having a newborn, your sleep, for the biggest test for our relationship right now has been the last 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Really, the first month was, and I'm being biased here, but I think we did pretty good. But like this, because I'm typically very cool, calm, and collected. Like, we've really very rarely had like, I don't want to call them arguments, but like, just like even like we've had disagreements, but like, um, but when it's 4 a.m., the baby's crying. How do you handle those situations? Um, and one thing that I credit both, I credit my wife for is like she even because when she was quick to those things, like very quick to apologize, very quick to like reconcile, which I think is super important too in a relationship. And um, yeah, I think if you want to, and this also comes back to what we talked about earlier with like picking a partner. I think because we early on, like I knew what I was looking for in terms of conflict resolution. I knew what she knew what she was looking for, and luckily, we handled those things early. Where so now when we have like I would consider one of the tougher times of all parenthood, we were able to navigate it really, really well because we did the front end work to make sure that how I'm going to handle like a situation and how she's going to handle it align pretty well, which
Mm-hmm.
I'm super grateful for. I think that's where like just single men need to do the work to know how they're going to handle situations and how their partner's going to handle situations too.
Yeah, and I tell a lot couples talk about all the difficult stuff right away
Yeah.
versus waiting till the day it happens. Like, oh, we're pregnant. What do we want to do? Or baby's here. What do we want to do? Or school starts tomorrow. Do we want to homeschool or do we want a public
Yeah.
school?
Yeah.
It's like get all those conversations. Just throw them on the table.
For sure.
If she doesn't
Yeah.
want to talk about them, she ain't the one.
100%. Yeah. And at the end of the day, too, like there's a time and place for everything, but yeah, you gotta hammer that stuff out. And then even when you're in the relationship, like there's still things that come up, and we're like, well, like how do you want it? Like just like you said, like we're just trying to talk about like the school situation and other stuff. This is touchy too, but it's like, what are you gonna do with vaccines? What are we gonna do with other stuff? Like all these conversations need to be had, and they can't be had like when we're in the doctor's office. And they're like, well, what do you want to do? And we're like,
Yeah.
oh,
So
yeah.
just by chance, I before we were ever pregnant, I was always telling my wife we're going to homeschool, and her mom works for the school system.
Oh wow.
So yeah, and then it was like we're not going to get our kid vaccinated like before we even had our child, and like there was times where I'm sure my wife was like, "This guy's fucking crazy,"
Yeah.
but we're dating right now, things are good. He's a little wacko.
Yeah.
Um, there was like so many of those topics that I was like, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. Like, and she would be like, not even like one vaccine. And it's like,
Mhm.
show me which one you want. She's like, well, I have no idea. It's just what everybody does. And it's like, we're going zilch. Uh,
It's
and
so
then
funny.
even her, I used before we ever had kids, it's like, if we ever have kids, like, you're not going back to work. And she thought that one was like the wild one. Cause it's like, what are you holding me down? You like suppressing me? Saying
Hmm.
50s. And then she thought she was going to go back to work until like he was born. And it's like that oxytocin release. And she's like, how could I ever leave this baby?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she hasn't worked since my oldest one was in the womb.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, it's the same. Like that's with my wife. Same thing with the back to work conversation. I would. I wasn't as direct as you, and maybe I could have been. It all worked out the same way, but I was like,
Mm.
babe, I don't think you're gonna want to go back to work. Like, I don't think you need to go back to work. Like, I would just keep on dropping hints. Like, I don't think you need to go back to work. She's like, well, like I built my business, and I get it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
for her, it was super difficult because that was her identity. Like, she's
Mm-hmm.
like I built this whole brand. Like, I have this stuff. She has. I don't know. And luckily, she kind of repositioned her content to now being kind of like mom focused. But she had like 30,000 followers on TikTok and like all
Dang.
hair content. And like she was getting sponsored, like little sponsorship deals. I don't call them little, but like she was getting actual sponsorship deals. She was getting um, all this stuff. And so like I get how that was going to be difficult for her. And
Mm-hmm.
so like I never wanted to like fully push her on it. But I was like, I just had the feeling that she was like, not going to want to come back. And then sure enough, it all ended up working out. And now, she's wrapping up. And because like you said, that once the oxytocin gets released, she's like, dude, like my heart breaks every time she's away for like an hour. Right? Like
Yeah.
so, she's like, dude, like I cannot be gone for 8 hours a day. She couldn't imagine. So I get it.
Yeah. I had a Erica Komisar on my podcast. She's a um, psychoanalysis person. She
Mm-hmm.
has a clinic, and they like went around the world and did studies on infants and their moms. And she was recently on the Diary of CEO podcast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I like to
Yeah.
brag that she was on mine first.
Yeah.
But
I mean, that was probably the springboard.
yeah, no, it had nothing to do with that. She felt bad for the peasant. She was like, "I'll give you some views."
That's
Um,
awesome.
but her clinic has done studies, a lot of studies on that, and just the lifetime. Um, oh, what was it called? Now I'm butchering it. She's probably never coming back. Uh, but just how both men and women both will have like separation issues. It's not the actual word that is used.
Mhm.
It going to daycare. They'll have like long term trust and relationship issues, even if like children and we think we're fine. It's like there
Wow.
are these underlying issues that happen when you just like put your child in daycare. Um, it was by far
Yeah.
my biggest podcast just on YouTube. It has like 12,000 views, and on
Nice.
Apple and Spotify, like my thumbnail says daycare is bullshit. So that was a
That's a good thumbnail.
yeah, it's a good thumbnail, and she drops a lot of knowledge on that stuff, and she's upper middle class. Her husband's an attorney, so like her clinic, they have the resources to go out and do all these studies. Um, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine putting my daughter in a daycare at this point, just with some like on top of like all the things you just mentioned with like psychologically how it impacts them, but just like
Hmm.
all the horror stories you hear, and it's like I I couldn't leave with her with really anybody besides like her grandma, like honestly, and even then it's scary.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, it's and and most family like, daycare is number one so expensive. It's like you a lot of the time would just be better off not working
Yeah.
versus working, and then after taxes like a big chunk of your income's just going straight to daycare so you can work. Like
Hmm.
what's like the financial cost and then the also the emotional cost. Like once you factor those things in, I mean, it's typically really not worth it for you if
Hmm.
daycare is your only option, uh, to put them in a daycare. It's
And
silly.
are you familiar with Dr. Daniel Ammon?
No.
Okay, he's a brain doctor. He's he was a psychologist who went full um, brain exam doctor guy because he was like, why are we prescribing medication to an organ that we don't ever actually examine? Right?
Mm.
SSRIs. He's like, if we when we prescribe medication to a heart, to your liver, anything else, we examine that organ first, but for the brain, we don't. So his clinic has actually done more brain scans than any other clinic in the entire world. And he's written a couple books, been on a bunch of people's podcasts, but he says that you can detect trauma at 6 weeks old from just going to daycare
That's
in a brain
crazy.
scan. Yeah. And
That's
yeah, and I get that moms get defensive, like, well, what am I supposed to do? It's two income, but I understand that, but it
yeah.
doesn't take away the fact that through brain scans we can see damage in those children at 6 weeks old, 8 weeks old when you go back to work.
Yep. 100%. And that's where it all comes back to. You got to figure out how to make enough money
Hmm.
to get your kids out of daycare and take
Yeah.
care of your family, take care of your wife. Um, it all starts with that. But yeah, because like well, and I was we do these like 3 day workshops right now, and we were just talking about also food, like the type of food that you can give to your kids when you have a little bit more money. It's a shame that like organic and grass fed and homegrown stuff is expensive, but what's the alternative,
Yeah. It's a
right?
lifelong investment into your body.
I know, and so like and I know we're pivoting from daycare to food, but it's like it's all the same thing. It's all
Yeah.
like what kind of life and how can you provide for your children, for your family, for your wife, for whoever. Um, it all stems with from money and creating a high producing skill.